Ambassador, thank you so much for speaking to CNN News 18.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Ambassador, Prime Minister Modi and the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met on multiple occasions to hold bilateral talks. And in fact, the recent one was at Hyderabad House, where both leaders discussed trade, clean energy, new technologies. And in fact, I remember Prime Minister Modi reiterated that Germany is India's largest trading partner in Europe. Ambassador, going by your assessment, where do you see this India-Germany strategic partnership going here onwards?
Let me start by saying we had a wonderful visit of the Chancellor here. Olaf Scholz was very happy. He was royally received by the Indian government. He had extensive talks with the Prime Minister, and I think he was he felt very well received and very, very honored by the Prime Minister. I think German-Indian relationship is at an all-time high right now.
Yeah.
We are covering so many areas of common interests, and basically you mentioned them all, if I can say. Yeah. Business and trade is one very important aspect of it. Geopolitics is another one, where the Chancellor and the Prime Minister sit together and really exchange their thoughts on the geopolitical situation. We have the very, very important area of fighting climate change and adapting to climate change, which Germany and India are trying to tackle in this common partnership for green and sustainable development. And last but not least, an area that becomes more and more important is the area of labor, skilled labor, migration coming from India to Germany. And that's also something that I think our leaders are very, very keen on seeing developed in the coming months.
Ambassador, the visit of Olaf Scholz is seen in a backdrop of Russia-Ukraine conflict. And in fact, I remember during his media interaction at Hyderabad House, he did mention that Russia-Ukraine conflict is a catastrophe. Now, Ambassador, there is a perception in India that West is making India to walk a tightrope in terms of G20 presidency. Because in last few ministerial level meetings, we saw that how the consensus couldn't be built and there was no joint statement coming. Even on multiple occasions, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar also reiterated that yes, Russia-Ukraine is an issue, but there are other issues, key issues on our agenda. Those issues need to be discussed. There should be progress on those areas. How would you like to respond to this perception? And do you really see India walking a tightrope, especially when the war is going on between Russia and Ukraine?
I think to start with, the perception is not accurate.
Okay.
I think that Germany and its allies and Western partners, as everybody, I think, want to make this Indian presidency of the G20 a success. And we are going the extra mile. And in fact, let me say in all frankness, we are very happy that India has the presidency right now, because it is a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And it is very important that a heavyweight like India holds this presidency. Now, you refer to the ministerial statements. I think when you listen to the Indian government, they pointed at the ones who were responsible for these failure, can I say, when it comes to the statements. That's Russia and China. Germany and others, many, and most of, I think 18 out of the G20 would have been happy with the statement as it was proposed by the Indian side, but Russia and China decided not to agree with it. And that's a pity, and I think it's not a good sign when it comes to also a good gesture towards the presidency. I still think that, I'm very confident that India will succeed in getting a very, very sound statement during after the summit in September. Why do I think that? We have seen what happened in Indonesia, where we got a very good statement, and the Indian side was extremely instrumental to get this statement. So I am full of confidence that in September we'll have a very, very solid statement, and I think the Indian side basically has so far delivered a fabulous presidency.
Okay. Ambassador, when West say that they are united, then there is a visit of President Macron to China to discuss trade, to discuss business with Chinese. Now, it was not only a business discussion, but he also went on to make commentary, and particularly on the ongoing confrontation between America and China with regards to Taiwan. And in fact, the sense of the statement that he made was that the world should not follow American viewpoint, especially the Western world. So do you really see that there is a sense of discomfort amongst the Western nations in terms of American viewpoint, and some of the nations are not very comfortable following America each and everywhere around?
So let me start by saying that visiting China is normal in a way. China is a huge factor in the world, and everybody has very, very differentiated relations with this very strong country. And my chancellor was even before President Macron visited China. He went to China. The president of the European Commission went to China. So there is a clear interaction with China. But at the same time, you have to see that China is maybe the biggest challenge we have to face right now in our time, and how to tackle China that is, on the one side, a partner when it comes to business, but also a competitor and also a rival when it comes to systems. So that's something we all have to sit together and discuss. I think that on the China policy in the West, there is no disagreement. You'll find that also when it comes to the French position, they are completely in accordance with what the West and the Americans say, where the French president, elaborates a bit in his thinking, is saying that can Europe continue to be so dependent on American security? And I think there he has a point. And what we have seen with Ukraine, where the European defense degree of capability of defense is not as high as we want it to be. So we, I think, have to sit down in Europe and say, what can we do in order to strengthen, to improve our own security, our own defense capabilities, and not being dependent on the US all the time. And I think President Macron makes a very pertinent point here. And my country, Germany, we have invested now, or we will invest a lot of money in order to strengthen our military after this shock, and it was a shock, of the aggression, Russian aggression, the war of aggression in Ukraine.
Okay. Ambassador, yesterday only we got this reports confirming that Xi Jinping speaks to President Zelensky. This is perhaps for the first time after this entire conflict started. And in fact, China has been trying to ramp up the efforts to become superpower. Recently, they got Iran and Saudi Arabia matter settled. Now, this is the second time they are giving effort. Chinese are giving effort. Xi Jinping is giving effort. In terms of even there's a news that they're sending their envoy to Ukraine and other countries to build a consensus. Maybe they're putting in effort. This is what Chinese have to say. Do you really think that China can be a reliable superpower if China becomes superpower in coming years?
So let me start by saying that I, of course, welcome every attempt to stop the violence in Ukraine. So if the Chinese president phones Mr. Zelensky, I welcome it. It's something that is maybe, if it is contributing to an improvement in the country, if it is contributing to stopping the Russian aggression, I'd be very happy if that might be the case. Now, you have to see China has huge interests in Ukraine. They have invested in Ukraine. There are Chinese companies in Ukraine. So it's not that they are upset. So for them, it's also a national interest that this thing, let's say, goes over. Whether I think that China can be playing a role in solving the conflict, I'm skeptical, frankly, because China has taken one side. So I think, we have seen a plan by China. There are some elements that are okay, but overall I would say I don't see China coming up as the mediator in the Ukraine conflict because it is too partisan.
Also, since we are discussing China, so there's a recent remark made by Chinese envoy to Paris, where he said that the sovereignty of the Baltic states are under question. How would you like to react to that?
This is a scandalous remark. I think this is the only word you can use. It is a scandalous remark.
But do you think that is a state's foreign policy?
So what we've seen, to a certain relief, I must say, was a correcting statement by the Chinese Foreign Ministry saying that it is the personal view of the envoy, and not the view of the Chinese state. And the Chinese government has said that they have taken up very early, diplomatic relations with all these countries. I think that is a little reassuring, but the fact that the Chinese ambassador makes such a remark is really shocking, I must say.
Okay. Ambassador, it's been 8 months for you to be here in New Delhi. Where do you see India's position? Like, India is also trying to position itself as a voice of Global South. Then I also want to know what is, in your understanding, what is India's importance with regards to Indo-Pacific? So if on these two subjects, if you can elaborate a bit.
So Indo-Pacific is quickly said. I think India is a huge factor in this whole new attention towards the Indo-Pacific. We see tensions in the region. We see that there is a new international attention is needed in the region. My country will be part of this international attention. And India is a very, very valued partner in this whole endeavor. And we feel that India is a very trusted and good friend in overseeing the situation in the Indo-Pacific. It will be a very, very important interlocutor for us and our partners in the years to come. When it comes to the Global South, let me start by saying I am not so fond of the notion of Global South.
Okay.
It's something that sounds very Western to me in a way. You see the West and America, and then the Global South. The Global South is a huge number of countries that are completely different. Singapore is a super developed country, and then there are countries that are very underdeveloped still. And
the grouping is not possible.
The grouping is a bit of a strange notion. But what I think, when you talk in this sort of generic term of a Global South, what I really think is that India, with its latest development, with the huge progress in many ways that we see in India, has great charisma for upcoming democracies, wherever they are. So what people see, or what people and governments see, is that a democracy with this, the values of freedom of speech, of freedom of beliefs, is capable of doing this. A democracy that is huge like India, full of languages, full of religions, full of different ethnicities, and is capable of putting up a country like we see India right now, gives enormous hope and inspiration to many countries. So I think India has a very strong charismatic role as an example, let's say, for these countries. And people are looking much more towards India than they might be looking towards Europe or so, because India has had this history from a very poor country and going to a very, the Prime Minister said that in 20 years' time or 25 years' time he wants to be a developed nation. I think that's an ambitious goal, but not an impossible goal to reach, seeing the fact what India has undergone. So I think this charismatic role of India, I see it very strongly.
So at least you believe that the perception is changing. But I would also like to draw your attention towards a cartoon which has been published by a German magazine. Now in that cartoon, many have not received it very well in India, and in fact many are calling it racist. So in the cartoon, the parallel has been drawn between the two trains. One is the old traditional Indian train where it's full of people inside and outside. And then there is the other swanky Chinese train, and the Indian train is taking over the Chinese train. So many have not received this cartoon very well. I want to know your position on
So this cartoon appeared in a German weekly. In Germany, like India, freedom of press. I'm not commenting on behalf of my government or in my ambassadorial role on cartoons, but I'm very happy to share my personal views. I think it's neither funny nor appropriate. I find it absolutely. I would like to invite the cartoonist to go with me on a metro ride in Delhi. Where metro in Delhi is so state of the art. It's much better than the metro.
And then we have Vande Bharats.
You have Vande Bharat. I'm going by train to Dehradun tomorrow, and this is the train system in India has developed in such a way so that it's a fantastic train. So the cartoon is not. I find it really not convincing. But let me tell you one thing. We have this saying in Germany: the big oak tree doesn't bother if some animal scratches its skin on the big oak tree. You know what I'm saying? So I think you should just ignore it. It's a cartoon in a German weekly
Okay.
of no importance. So that's what my advice to the Indians see. I understand that people feel offended. I do understand that. But I think one should not put too much importance on it.
Since you have said that you want to invite the cartoonist to come and have a ride, so that says it all. Sir, also, my next question is going to be on the defense cooperation. When Olaf Scholz came to India, he did give emphasis to the defense cooperation. In fact, sir, several reports suggest that Germans have offered a submarine deal to India. And in fact, some reports also go on to say that HDW Dolphin class submarine are being offered to India. So is there any negotiation taking place? And Dolphin class is very rare to be offered to a country outside NATO. If you can elaborate or maybe give clarification on that.
Clarification, first of all, I must say this is first and foremost a negotiation between two private sector companies. It's the private sector company that produces the submarines in Germany and the counterpart here in India. So what we have to wait for is whether these two parties really get together. I'm very hopeful that they will, and then we'll see it from there. I think the German government is very interested in getting to develop a partnership with the Indian government on that. I'm positive, but I think we are at a very early stage right now.
Dolphin class, if you would like to, is that?
I think that the Indian side has a very clear idea what they want, very clear idea what they want, and that is also poses a certain problem technically for the company. But these problems are now on the table to be overcome.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador, my last question to you is regarding commentary that came from the German government when opposition leader Rahul Gandhi got disqualified. Ambassador, you are living in India. You must have understood Indian politics also. What is your position on that entire case? And do you really think that injustice is being done to Rahul Gandhi? Or maybe what is your government's official stand? Because I remember that when I asked the MEA spokesperson about Donald Trump's indictment, he replied to my question by saying that India doesn't do commentary on any nation's internal matter. But at the same time, he said that what Germans did is also not accepted. So how would you like to maybe clarify, or what's your position? Yeah.
So let me start by saying that if a journalist asks in a press conference, and the statement you refer to was an answer to a journalist in the press conference, there is an old practice to answer these questions in a comprehensive way. You can't in Germany say, none of our business, we don't care. Or we don't interfere, not care, we don't interfere. That's not acceptable in this. So this is the sort of the practice and the pattern of engaging with journalists in Germany. If you look at the statement, it is completely factual. It says, we took note of the verdict. To our knowledge, legal means are available. And knowing the Indian justice system, we expect a fair trial. Nothing but that. That's the three elements. And for us, the harsh reaction from the Indian side was very surprising. Now, we have to take that into consideration now. For us, it's a lesson learned in a way, so that we have to word even more carefully. But I think the factual statement that doesn't include any judgment, not at all. Basically, what we feel, and that's what we tell our Indian friends time and again. India has a completely independent justice system. So the judiciary in India is independent. They take it's like back home. It's like in Germany. So that's what we tried to express. It was a three-sentence answer. It was meant as a clear and absolutely factual statement. We've seen the strong reactions. Apparently, the perception was different. In diplomacy, it's all about perceptions. It's not, we have to try to, and we will take that into consideration.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for speaking to CNN News18. Thanks a lot.